The idea this morning was to randomly sample about 11,000 people, and you were among those that were randomly sampled, where we reached out and sent out those postcards and then followed up with some phone calls to see if you were interested in participating in what I would describe as a unique town hall, where we'll be asking you not just for your opinion and not just for your voice, but we'll be asking for your vote. And we'll explain that in a moment, and that will explain in turn what those strange contraptions are doing on your table in front of you. The idea is an idea that we processed about 4 years ago, where I had a similar interactive town hall meeting that was very well received, at least by those participating. Those that didn't get to participate were, of course, upset. But those folks tend to be at every single public hearing anyway at City Hall, and it wasn't like their voices aren't being heard. So the idea was to try to remove a little of the intimidation of City Hall, a little bit of the intimidation of the loud voices that sometimes drowned out all those other voices, and to provide a framework where you can calmly and casually talk to folks around your table and deliberate, and then have an opportunity to go through this interactive exercise of expressing your voice in a systemic way, in a way where we can capture it pursuant to this voting system, and then I can walk away with a better sense of what, quote-unquote, real people in the city are thinking about their city and their priorities. As I said, and I say this with respect and admiration, I've said this a lot before, I'm implying it this morning, but let me state it for you at least. I've always thought, and I've been doing this for 15 or so years at City Hall, that there are about 150 people that run this city. They're the ones that just show up more often than everybody else. And in so many ways, are the exact same people I saw the day I got in a local elected office. And they're down at City Hall every single day, at every hearing. They're making their positions known. A lot of them are paid to be there. In fact, the vast majority are paid to be there. And at the end of the day, they don't necessarily always represent you. They certainly, I think, do an extraordinary job representing themselves and those organizations that are either providing for the resources for them to be there or the organizations they're most attached to. Again, that's not a critique of that advocacy. I admire it. Woody Allen said, 90% of life is just showing up. So I get that. But a lot of you can't afford to show up. You can't afford to wait 2, 3, I've seen some hearings 6 or 7 hours to wait to get, well, at that point, maybe 30 seconds or 60 seconds to make a comment when you sense that everybody up on that stage already has decided what to do anyway. You can't leave work. Or you just simply can't afford the time away from the kids, or you just simply have something better to do. So I'm very appreciative that you took the time to be here today. I hope that this will serve some benefit for you. If nothing else, it will give you a sense of the magnitude of our challenge and give you a broad strokes overview of how government works. It will be imperfect. It's not meant to be a tutorial, nor is it meant to be too prescriptive, meaning we're not going to break down every single one of the 1,000+ decisions that we'll ultimately need to make to balance this historic budget shortfall. But we'll give you broad strokes in areas like public safety, health and human services, recreation and parks, and you'll have a chance to get a sense of the trade-offs. Because we all know what we're against. It's hard to figure out what we're for in the context of having to make tough choices to balance a budget that cannot be balanced by raising taxes. It cannot be balanced by borrowing. I say that in contrast to the state and certainly the federal government. Of course, the federal government has one additional tool, and that is they can print money in addition to those other tools. And that is something, obviously, in the local government we're not afforded. We have to balance a budget by June 1st. Kate Howard and Greg Wagner and my budget team will walk you through what that means and how that's done. And then we're going to ask for your advice, your counsel, and direction and we'll hopefully, I don't know that it's possible on the topic of a budget, but hopefully have a little bit of fun. Thank you all very, very much for being here. I'm pulling it over to Kate right now. Oh, you got it.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. Thanks, Mayor. I'm Kate Howard. I am on the Mayor's budget team. Greg Wagner and I, who's the Mayor's budget director and who is sitting somewhere. Greg, where are you? Oh, he's sitting down. He's hiding. We're going to be tag teaming, asking you some questions this morning. I also want to point out a few people here and say thank you. So first, thank you to all of you for showing up. Second, thank you to all of our facilitators. Every table has a facilitator. If you're a facilitator, can you raise your hand? Thanks for volunteering your time today to help us through this conversation. Third, I want to say thank you to our department heads who have come today and given their time to listen to the opinions and ideas of the public. If you're a department head, show of hands. All right. We've got department heads representing the entire city here today. And if you're a department head and you're sitting way at the back, come up in the front, join another table, and listen to the conversation. First, a couple of logistical points. If you need to get up and use the restroom, take a bio break, get a bite to eat, please do that. We want you to be comfortable. If you miss a question, that's okay. But we want you to enjoy yourself and be comfortable. Food and restrooms are just through these doors over here to my right. Second, you're not going to have a lot of time on each topic today. So we may move the conversation along, and it may feel a little quick, but we're going to ask that you bear with us so we get through all the topics that you're interested in talking about. All right, so third, I want to introduce to you our great technology team from Next 10. We've got Sarah and Sonali. You want to raise your hands right here. They're going to be running the technology for us this morning. And so I want to give Sarah a quick chance to explain to you what we're going to be doing and how the voting works, how these clickers work. So Sarah, would you explain the technology?
So good morning, everybody. Today you're going to be asked a bunch of questions, and you're going to be able to vote on the questions with the clickers that you have in front of you. So everybody at the table should have a clicker. We'll put the questions up on the screen, and you'll be able to see the different choices. As soon as you know what decision you want to make, you can lock in your vote. Anytime the question is up on the screen, you can make your decision with the clicker. You don't need to point it anywhere. Just make your vote. It'll get registered. And then at the end of the discussion period, we'll put up a 5-second timer. You can change your mind at any time. You can re-vote. You can press that button 100 times. You're only going to waste our battery. The last vote that gets registered, when the timer goes off, that's the vote that we'll lock in for you. So if you have any questions, you can always tag one of us and ask us, but they're really straightforward, really simple, and it's definitely a way to get your vote heard.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so let's put up the first slide so we can walk people through the agenda for today, and then we're going to ask you to introduce yourselves to each other. So first, next slide, please. What we've got planned for you is the welcome. We're doing that now. We're going to ask you, like I said, to introduce yourselves to your table mates, and then you're going to get a brief presentation about San Francisco's budget. How does it work? What are the key revenues and expenditures? And what is the deal with this $522 million shortfall? Why do we have it? Then we're going to move on, and we're going to ask you at your small tables to have some discussions and then to vote on some key policy questions that we're going to put in front of you. Those policy areas are going to include public works, health, public safety, culture and recreation, human welfare and neighborhood development, general city administration, and transportation. Okay? Then we're going to kind of take a look at, did we balance or not, right? How much progress did we make towards reducing the city's deficit? That's why we're really here today. We're here to get your priorities and hear your thinking about how should the city reduce the size of our deficit and try to balance our budget. And then finally, we'll share with you a few next steps and say thank you and get you out of here by noon so you can have the rest of your afternoon. I also wanted to say one additional thank you. Actually two. Number one, to Safeway and to Phil's Coffee for donating the refreshments this morning. And number two, a surprise for you, thank you to the Academy of Sciences, a tenant here, a partner in Golden Gate Park who donated a free pass to the Academy for each of our participants today. So thanks to the Academy of Sciences for donating those tickets. All right, so now we want to get going. So we're going to ask you to turn to your table mates, and we'd like you to say your name, what neighborhood you live in, and what brought you here this morning. We're going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes to do that.
Sir, I want to introduce you to Sheldon and to Martha. Do you want to tell a little about yourself?
Marina. In the marina. I live up in Gavin. In Chestnut. You were my student. You were my supervisor. And I really appreciate it. No, I mean, you were my supervisor at one time.
And then Sheldon used to be a former police officer. He is a former police officer, right? So you're in the school district?
Why don't we bring that table over here?
Time for me to do something.
Wait for 2 minutes. They can say their names to each other. Give them 1 more minute.
How many questions?
What age group? What's your favorite sports team? How long have you lived in it?
Everyone take just 2 more minutes.
Your highest priority for sex and city services to do the most, and how much you understand. 7 questions. 7 and 18. 7 and 18. Yes?
Oh, yeah. I ain't doing it. No way.
No, that was sweet this morning. And the love and the devotion they have for it.
Oh, they must be happy, yeah.
Very sweet.
Well, they need to step it up. All right, everybody. Now we're going to see if you were paying attention to how this voting works. I hope you got a chance to at least say your names. And now I'm going to ask if I could get all your attention for 1 brief minute. And we're just going to see if you guys are awake by asking some of the toughest questions of the day. We will start by asking you to pick up whatever this little thingy is and vote by answering this question. Which age group do you fall in? And you cannot, there's no need to manipulate this. Be honest. We don't know who voted what. So press 1 if you are 0 to 18, 2, 19 to 29, 3, 30 to 45, 46 to 60. You can see it up there, most of you. And then any of you 61 years or younger or older, 5. So if you could just press that thing. I don't think you'll have to change your mind in this case. You may want to, but I'm not sure it's going to be accurate. And as you guys vote, the computer tallies, and that'll give you a sense. So one of you is 18 and younger, 32%, 61 or older. I think you got a sense of how this works. We'll go up to the next slide. What's your favorite Bay Area sports team? Another tough question. The Giants, number 1, 49ers, 2, Oakland A's, number 3, the San Francisco Raiders, the Oakland Raiders, they're looking for a new stadium, and then the San Jose Sharks, number 5. Tally, 3, 2, the winner is... Definitely a home crowd. I like it. All right, number 3. How long have you lived here? 0 to 2 years, 3 to 5, 6 to 10. And those of you that have been in this town, press number 4 if you've been here more than 11 years. I know, just 11 plus. I'm with you. All right, no, I'm not with you, but I'll get there. I'll get there. Oh, I like it. Kind of old school San Francisco crowd. Very nice. All right, what's your favorite park? Now, I know this is limited. I know you're thinking that my favorite's not on there. But of those 5 that we put up, is it Golden Gate Park, Dolores Park, McLaren Park, Ocean Beach kind of park? I don't know why Ocean Beach isn't there, but we put it in anyway. Or Marina Chrissy Field. Press. 4 seconds left. Press your favorite park. Oh, not surprising. 65% of you pick Golden Gate Park. I think it's because you just got a free ticket to the Academy of Science. Which city service is your highest priority? This is now, here we're getting a little bit more of the substance of why we came. If public safety is your number 1 priority, press 1. If health and human services, health care, the like, is your number 1 priority, press 2. Transportation, muni, I know it hasn't gotten much attention lately. If that's your number 1 priority, press 3. Recreation and parks. And those folks that are here at the Botanical Garden, number 4. Or infrastructure maintenance. You're sick and tired of the potholes in the city and the streets. And the sewage system needs to be improved, and you've had enough. Press number 5. 4 seconds. All of the above works too. I got you. We'll get into the details of this. Interesting. So you know why I love this? Because that tells you how difficult it is to balance a big budget deficit. Because everybody weighs things rather similarly, not dissimilarly. So this is going to be some fun. This will be an interesting discussion today. We'll get to the next slide. Which city services do you use most? Are you one of those that calls the police and fire department every day? Are you on muni? Often. Hospitals, you're sick. Or you want to stay healthy, and you're in our community clinics. Press 3. Human services, you know someone who's on County Adult Assistance Program, welfare, gets food stamps, human services. Or you just love our recreation centers, our parks, the beautiful bathrooms in all the neighborhood rec centers. Press number 5 if those are the services you use more often. And I know you use a little bit of everything, but sort of lean into one versus the other. Got to be 2. Well, parks, all right. Well, I think we had some of the striping arboretum folks in the back that helped with number 5, but transportation, not surprising. When you transport roughly the equivalent of the entire city population every day, it's not surprising the city service used most is public transit. All right, how well do you currently understand, based on all of this good information you've received, the city's budget? Not so much I'm a novice, and by the way, that's a lot of folks at City Hall should press number 1. That is said in the spirit of love and respect to the reporters. Number 2, I keep track of major budget issues, meaning, I pay some attention to the big issues. Number 3, I'm very familiar. I mean, I'm watching this every day. Or you're just an expert. You're like Greg Wagner is coming up, or Kate Howard, or my chief of staff who just lives and breathes budgets. A few seconds, log in, and we'll see. Yeah, that's about what you'd expect. Almost 80% of you, not so much, or I just keep track of the big things. So this will be, I think we're at the end of this, you'll probably be leaning to number 3. You're going to get a lot more familiar with the budget, and I think this is a very good sign that we're here and we're going to get something out of this afternoon or this morning. Do we have one more? That's it. All right, now we're going to get into the guts. We're going to get into a little bit of the narrative of some of the trade-offs and some of the big issues. We're going to ask Kate and Greg to come back up, and they're going to walk through. You know, we threw out that $522 million problem, but we never give you a context for it. We didn't tell you how big the budget was. We didn't tell you how much was going in all those big 5 categories or 4 categories you guys just voted on. And we'll do that now without torturing you. Greg promised not to talk budget speak, but to talk in real terms that all of us can understand so that we could be understood as we vote on some of the priorities after his brief presentation.
All right, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll try, although budget speak is my first language. You know, as the mayor said, we don't expect you guys to be budget experts. You don't have, like I do, the time to spend every day thinking about the budget, and we understand that. And but we do want to give you a little bit of background on the city budget just to help you get a little bit of context for what we're going to be talking about today. Help you give a sense of what our deficit is about and why we brought you here, and just give you a little bit of context so that you can get into the voting on some of the city services. So one of the unique things, of the many unique things about San Francisco, our budget is also unique. We are the only local government in the state that is both a city and a county. Most local governments are a city or a county. We are both, and that means we provide many more services, a wider variety of services than most local governments. So we have more to do. And that means that we have a relatively large city budget, a $6.6 billion budget. So that's a lot of money that we're working with. But there are a couple of key categories within that budget that we want to emphasize, because there are parts of the budget that are more relevant to what we're talking about right here today, and parts of the budget that are very important, but that are not really the subject of what we're going to vote on for the next hour or so. The biggest category of our budget is non-general fund. This is the major distinction I want to point out, is non-general fund versus general fund. The non-general fund portion of the city's budget is the portion that is the departments in our budget that tend to generate their own revenues. They bring in revenues by charging for their services through your water rates, through airport revenues. They bring in enough money to support their own services. The general fund portion of the budget, which is a smaller portion of the budget, slightly, $3.1 billion, about a little less than half of our budget, are the departments in the city that tend to be funded with your general tax revenues, with your property taxes, your sales taxes, and their services that the city provides that don't generate money in exchange for those services. And the general fund is what we're going to be spending most of our time focusing on today. It's also worth pointing out, I think, as the mayor often does, that within our general fund it's $3.1 billion, but within that $3.1 billion we have a lot of restrictions on how we can use that money. So, for example, the voters in San Francisco have passed a number of ballot measures over the years that say, for example, we need to spend a set proportion of our revenues on the public libraries, or on the open space fund in the Rec and Park Department, or on Muni. And so within our budget we have a lot of restrictions. There are also state and federal mandates. So even within the city's general fund, of our $3.1 billion general fund, only $1.2 billion of that is truly what we call discretionary, which is a subject for the policymakers in the city, the mayor and the board of supervisors, to decide each year without restriction how we're gonna use that money to fund city services. So just to go through this distinction in a little bit more detail, the general fund departments, again, those departments that are funded largely with our general tax dollars, property taxes, sales taxes, business taxes, those types of things, are the police department, the fire department, the sheriff, which runs our jails, the Health and Human Service Departments, which run our hospitals, our clinics, our social safety net services, the Public Works Department, which cleans the streets and fills the potholes, the Recreation and Park Department, and a lot of our general government operations, such as the Mayor's Office, the Board of Supervisors, the core government entities in our city charter. On the other hand, the enterprise departments, which again generate their own revenue and don't rely directly on your tax dollars, are the airport, which is funded with landing fees from the airlines that use the airport and concessions at the airport. The MTA, Muni, which does receive some general fund, but it also relies heavily on fares that you pay to use the system, on the parking tickets you get when you forget to move your car on street sweeping day, those other types of revenues. And so we are going to talk about MTA somewhat, but it is separated from the general fund. And then the port, the Public Utilities Commission, which is funded through your water bills and your sewer bills primarily. Those are self-funded departments and not part of the city's general fund. I also want to just briefly mention there are some other city agencies which are local government agencies but are not part of the city budget, and we do know that these are very important agencies, and they're agencies that we deal with in the mayor's office and in the city. We interact with them a lot. They're an important part of what happens in the city, but they're not part of the city government. So we do want to hear your thoughts on these agencies, but they're not part of the decisions that we make in our city budget for the most part. And that includes most notably the school district, which is a creation of state government and separate and distinct from the city, the community college district, and our housing authority. Next slide, please. So focusing in on the general fund, which is the portion of the budget that is funded predominantly with general tax dollars, where do those revenues in the general fund come from? They come from mostly, the largest source is property taxes at 34%, and then other taxes are, it's a little bit hard to see the color coding on here, but that 27% is other taxes. That's business taxes, sales taxes, hotel taxes, other non-property taxes. The 22% on the left there is state and federal revenue, which is also a very significant source of money for the city budget. And then we also have other sources of revenue, which include things like fees that we charge for city services and that sort of thing. So how do we spend our revenues? This, again, is focusing on the general fund. The largest category within our general fund is, perhaps not surprisingly, public safety, public protection. That includes our police department, our fire department, a lot of our criminal justice agencies, such as the public defender, who's here today, the district attorney, a lot of our criminal justice agencies. Next largest is human welfare and neighborhood development. That is a lot of our social safety net programs. The largest department in this category is the Human Services Agency, which pays for a lot of our, again, social safety net programs, assistance programs, support for individuals who lack resources, and that's a significant part of our general fund budget. Community health is our Department of Public Health. We run two major hospitals, San Francisco General and Laguna Honda Hospital. We have a number of clinics around the city, and we have programs, behavioral health programs, including services for mental health and substance abuse, which are funded in our health department. Let's go to the next slide. Why do we have in our general fund a $522.2 million deficit? When you hear about our city deficit, this is what we're talking about, is the deficit generally in the general fund. You know, you also hear about the deficit at the MTA at Muni, but this is our primary, when we're talking about the city deficit, this is what we're talking about, is what's going on in the general fund. As the mayor said, we can't print money, we can't borrow. We have an ironclad requirement under our under our laws that say we must balance our budget every year. So to balance our budget, revenues must equal expenditures. If revenues don't equal expenditures, our budget is out of balance, and the difference between revenues and expenditures is our deficit. So what's happening right now in the city is our revenues are down, and this is predominantly a result of the economic circumstances around us. And we have a real estate-based recession that's affecting our property tax revenues at the city. Our business taxes are down as businesses are struggling with the economy. We have a significant shortfall in revenue. We're also losing money from the state, which has its own financial problems. On the expenditure side, our expenditures are also growing. The city government, like the rest of the economy, is seeing increases in employee benefit costs. Half of our budget is employees. Healthcare costs are growing every year like they are in the rest of the economy, and we're paying more for retirement benefits and other benefits associated with operating the government. That's one of our major cost drivers. So just to summarize, we have a $290.7 million decline in revenues projected next year, and a $231.5 million increase in expenditures projected. And you add those two up, we have a shortfall of $522.2 million. So over the next few months, the city is going to be working on figuring out a way to close that deficit, and that's what we are predominantly here to talk with you today about and to hear your thoughts on, is how should we prioritize decisions and go about meeting this challenge. Next slide. So we'll be talking about the general fund, as I said. We'll also be asking you some questions about the MTA, since it's about Muni, since it's clear that that is the service that we all use. From your voting, it's clear that that's a service we all use frequently. And we're going to be asking you to weigh in on some basic types of decisions that we have to make when we balance the budget. And we're going to focus on the types of ideas and things that we can do in the current year. So I think with that, we will just jump right into it, and if Kate could come up, we'll talk about what we're going to do, and we'll get right into the voting.
All right, get ready to vote. Use those clickers. Okay, so can we go back one slide quickly? Or is this where we are? Okay, this is where we are. Okay, so given what you know right now, and we know that for a lot of you, this is the first time you really ever spent any time thinking about the city's budget. But just given what you know right now, how would you approach balancing the city's budget? Option 1, reduce services and staffing. Option 2, restructure services and staffing. Option 3, increase taxes and fees to generate new revenue. Option 4, do all of the above. This is not my question. Oh, it's not a voting. Oh, so then I'm getting the sign of this is not voting. So we want you to vote on this, though. So we're just going to do a show of hands instead. We're going to do low tech. And option 4 is all of the above, and option 5 is something else. Okay, so show of hands. Given what you know right now, how many would want to reduce services and staffing? Option 1. Okay, a couple of people. Option 2. How many of you would be interested in restructuring services and staffing? A couple more. All right. Option 3. How many of you would like to increase taxes and fees to generate new revenue? All right. A few hands. All right. Option 4. Do all of these choices. All right. This side of the room seems to like option 4. All right. How about option 5? Do something else. A few hands. I don't think everybody voted on this question. All right, so we can do taxes and fees separately right now. So how many of you would like to increase taxes? Show of hands. All right. How many people would like to increase fees, a fee you pay for a service you get from the city? All right, a few more. Okay, great. So no clicker technology on this one, but we'll have it for the next time. All right, so let's move on to the next question, or the next topic. So now we're going to have you go into your roundtables, and we're going to present a couple of policy areas for you. We're going to ask you to vote on some policy questions, and these are the topics that we're going to go over. We mentioned this before. Public works, health, public safety, culture and rec, human welfare, general city administration, and transportation. All right, everybody clear on what we're doing? You ready to vote? All right, so 2 quick ground rules. Ground rule 1, every idea is valid and we need to be respectful and listening to everybody else. And rule number 2, have a good time. Okay? All right. So let's dive right in. Greg, you want to come up and do an overview of Public Works, Transit, and Commerce?
All right, sure, very briefly, and we'll get to voting. The first area we're going to look at is Public Works, Transportation, and Commerce. This is a number of our enterprise departments, including the airport, the PUC, Muni, and the Department of Public Works. And first off, we're going to focus in on a couple of those areas that receive general fund support either directly or indirectly. The Muni, which we all love, and on the Department of Public Works. So first off, the Department of Public Works is a general fund department. This is one of the departments whose expenditures and revenues factor into our $522.2 million deficit. And the Department of Public Works is responsible for a lot of things that you experience directly or indirectly in your daily lives. So we're responsible for keeping the streets clean. When you see the trucks coming down the street sweeping, those are Department of Public Works trucks. They remove graffiti from public property. They maintain and plant a lot of the street trees throughout the city. And they fill the potholes. When you call 311 to report a pothole, it's the Department of Public Works that comes out and patches it. So let's go on to the question. So the question that we want to ask you is to give us an indication of, knowing that we have this $522.2 million deficit, how you think the services at the Department of Public Works, and I see Ed Riskin, our Director of Department of Public Works, giving me the eye over there in case this vote doesn't go right. The question is, how do you think that in our city budget deliberations we should treat the Department of Public Works? Should we keep it at its current staffing levels, meaning we continue operations as is? Should we increase its funding, meaning that we do more street cleaning, we remove more graffiti, but we add to our $522.2 million deficit? So we're going the wrong direction in terms of the deficit. Or should we reduce funding for the Department of Public Works? Now, obviously, these aren't all the choices you could have. There are a lot of different nuances. But what we're really trying to do is just give you some options and get a sense of what your feeling is on this. So go ahead and get into your groups and talk about this. Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah. Well, that's a good question, and there are a couple of So there are a couple of answers. One is that you have on your table a packet with some information about the departments that your facilitator will give you. The second is, we know that we don't have perfect information. What we really need to do is just rely on your experience about what the city is like. Look at what you see when you're walking down the street. Are the streets clean? Do you want more? How do you weigh the services that this department provides against some of the other services in the city budget? So go ahead and jump in and start talking to each other, and we'll let you know in a couple of minutes when it's time to vote.
household care anymore because they're already in but
I think this is a very simplistic idea, and the fourth option you've got available to maximize efficiency within these departments. There's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of waste, and that's what they should grant rid of first, in my opinion. You don't seem to be guilty of that at all, and this is all the first place to how do you think that's going to increase in my cut 20% of everything, regardless of whether that makes any sense or not. So I don't understand how we're supposed to vote on something when there's no money. It's not like, okay, the money has to come from somewhere. Where's the money going to come from?
I think the exercises today are obviously going to be simplistic.
That's an understatement.
It's a 2.5-hour exercise. Replicating a process that for the city takes about 11 months. To get to it, I don't know. It's much more complicated, and of course, so anything you're doing here is not going to be anything even approaching the total number of choices. But I think that the concept that Greg's talking about is the general value of the service, of different services versus and so public.
Vote like the best money instead of
no, that's true. That's true.
Increasing money is not it sounds like they say we can boost it. Now, somebody else is going to...
Everyone take just one more
I'm
minute.
not realistic about this. I don't get this.
But I think that's the point. Determine your priorities. Is this more important than public safety? So yes, if you increase this, you might have to decrease public
It's
safety.
so simplistic because there's all these different things.
Right.
This whole traffic removal, tree planting,
Absolutely.
I mean, we don't know what these things are being spent on exactly or what the needs are.
No.
Whereas tree cleaning can half just by getting neighborhood controls to do it.
I think it's to take your temperature. See
I know, but I'm saying it's not
we have a world-class city. We have a lot of people coming to the city, and obviously we all live here and we can be a little bit more responsible about picking things up, but I think for me personally, I have a lot of visitors, a lot of family, a lot of people coming, and I want to be proud of the way that the city looks. So decreasing the part is not ideal for me. I don't also think that we need to increase because I think like street cleaning, if that's what's smart, if everybody knew that was this much money, then maybe everybody would pick up their can on the sidewalk. I just think it's not known very well that it costs so much. And somebody thinks, oh, well, the street cleaner guy will pick it up, so I'll just leave it. That's my 2 cents.
Again, not in isolation. If you increase the funding for public works, then you have to take that money from another area. So that's where the prioritization comes from. So would you rather have more homeless or more garbage? So I mean that is very simple, and I can. So
You're all a deep conversation. My apologies for breaking this up, but I want to get you out as we promised to get you out. And as I break things up and make you angrier
and angrier, I want to just very briefly, and I mean with 30 seconds, just take advantage of the fact that our director, as Greg said, of Department of Public Works is here. Not that he's going to offer a biased analysis of where he wants things to go, but I thought he would just offer what the challenge he has and what he's been asked to do so that it can guide you in helping us help him.
So, good morning, everyone. Ed Riskin, Director of Public Works. The main things that we do with the general fund dollars that we get from the city are we keep the streets clean, or we try to keep the streets clean. We try to keep graffiti out of the neighborhoods. We repair the streets, and we maintain the street trees and the medians and all the green spaces that are not in parks or not in people's private property. Our challenge is we get something like 10,000 service requests a month through 311 to go ahead and paint out graffiti, to clean up streets, to clean sidewalks, to trim trees. And we have our resources, as all the other departments for the most part, have been shrinking each year. But the demand for our services keeps increasing each year. Some of what we were talking about at our table here was other strategies such as community partnerships, and we try our best to bring folks into the fold to help us maintain their neighborhood. So we do a lot of that. The bottom line is what these choices are, I think, are really what you need to think about as a reflection, as Greg said, of how clean and in what condition do you want the streets and public rights of way to be. If you think, you know, it wouldn't really, in the face of a $500 million deficit, it wouldn't really kill us if it took a little longer to pick up graffiti or pick up illegal dumping, you know, then you should think about a cut. If you think there's no way that we should be contemplating our city getting dirtier, graffiti staying on buildings more, then you need to think about the other choices. But that's basically what we're faced with our looking at our general fund budget.
All right, so if you pick number one, then we're going to have to dig deeper someplace else. If you pick number two, well, we're going to dig a lot deeper someplace else because we'll be moving in the wrong direction in terms of the budget deficit. But you may want to do that because this is your number one priority. That's why you came here. You said it's about graffiti, it's about streets, it's about basic services. I'm sick and tired of all this other ancillary service. It's about getting back to basics. Or if you want to align yourself with the challenge that many of us are faced, and that is finding a balanced approach to balancing a budget, you may want to pick number three. With that in mind, why don't you pick up your clickers and make your voice heard in a silent manner. You guys are already cutting. Unbelievable. Just like that. But interesting, 6% of you just increased the budget deficit. So we'll be responsible for figuring out how we get to balance at the end. But it's pretty suggestive that the vast majority of you at least understand that we're going to have to make some sacrifices as it relates to the budget at the Department of Public Works. With that, Greg will walk us now down the path of offering up a second conversation for the tables and walk through the issue that has been the dominant issue the last few weeks, and that's the issue of the Metropolitan Transportation Agency. Remember, and by the way, all compliments and complaints can be directed to the director of the MTA, who, for whatever reason, decided not to call in sick and is here today, Nathaniel Ford. This is not a general fund department. Remember, this does not directly impact our budget deficit, but nonetheless impacts our lives and the economy of the city. And so we thought we would be remiss to not have a discussion around transportation today. And so Greg will lead us into this topic.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And
he's been watching Glenn Beck, so he's got a chalkboard. And he wants to, I know. I didn't make any, I didn't analyze it.
The mayor knows me too well. Up on the board here, as case indicated, just if you want to look up here and see what kind of progress we are or are not making towards our $522 million based on your votes. You can keep an eye out here. So you just cut $4.5 million out of poor Ed Riskin's budget, but you've brought us down to $517 million deficit. So on to Muni. Mr. Ford here can tell you that they had a meeting on this yesterday to discuss some of these very options. The Muni budget has lost a lot of money to the state government, and they're also facing cost increases and some of the economic issues that are affecting the whole city budget. And they are projecting to have, over the next couple of years, over $100 million deficit in the Muni system. So the options that you have are to increase fares, fees, and fines. Fares are your Muni fares. Fees and fines are the things like the cost of a ticket on the street, and the other transportation-related fees that you pay into the system. To reduce service and have fewer Muni buses running each day. to change some of the work rules for the city employees. This is another discussion that's been happening to change some of the way that we operate to save some costs on overtime, or to give money from the general fund to Muni, which will increase our deficit by $30 million, but it will help Muni, our general fund deficit by $30 million, but it will help Muni get through its deficit with fewer impacts. So go ahead and discuss amongst yourself, and we'll yell when it's time to vote.
Public transportation is kind of what makes a city function. If people can't get to work, we're going to drive more. That's way more expensive than buses. That's way more expensive on the road system. I was curious as to the option about changing the work rules. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer, but I'm sure if you were an employee or a union, you'd be opposed to that.
Sounds like small goals for everyone overall, but not for the people who work for Muni, I guess.
In one of the charter revisions, we approved an issue that said that Muni employees would be the second highest earners in the country, and that seems like an issue that should be re-examined.
Right. Even for public transportation workers across the country, right?
Yes.
Right.
At least as much as.
Right.
For many, many years, the charter said that Muni folks had a maximum of the average of the top two highest paid earners for drivers in the country. We changed that several years ago. Instead of a maximum to a minimum. And the reason was the thought that if we gave them more money, could we at least change work rules? Because Muni has less part-time work drivers than almost anybody else in the country. And so if you had more part-time drivers, you weren't paying them all day long. When people aren't commuting all day long, you could save that much money. The work rules never got changed. So we have the old work rules, and we pay more. That's been the difficulty.
Work rules, is that something that needs to be done in the charter? Or
some things in the charter, some things by MOU, by agreement.
Right.
And your point, that's really the straw. The people, we're basically paying people to sit around all day. We need them to drive in the morning and the evening, and then what are they supposed to do? So they sit around all day at the barn, waiting for the...
Muni has a lot more people all day long than that. Only Transit brings the buses in, parks them all day. Muni buses run all day, but they're much less crowded in the middle of the day.
but I will say, like, on some lines, I ride the one regularly, and even midday, sometimes it's standing remotely in your shop. You're saying these aren't commuters, but still,
Depends on the light.
yeah. But
Sorry.
I say Muni is something that a lot of people use on a regular basis. They said that pretty much the number of the rides it daily. So for something that so many people use, I'm concerned that the fares are rising at a dramatic rate every year, and service has gone down. And I think it just sort of impacts daily quality of life for a lot of citizens of the
You have to take into consideration, though, that with the recent changes, Muni is one of the, city transportation services whose ridership has increased in the past year. It didn't go down even with the economic recession, and on-time performances, are still consistent. So it is something that to consider. And
The most used service.
right.
By far.
So I also think to reflect
On this topic.
that it's very cheap to take the bus round trip. It's much less than me driving it for more than 1 hour. And so I think raising the fares is fine. I just would hate to see the cutback of the services, because if there's no alternative, it's a disaster for most people.
It's going to make us harder. It's going to
As
add some
we
congestion.
pull away, I'm going
Charge people
to
more. If you want to go
again
downtown,
take
pay for it
advantage
in your car.
of your time
Right.
And take advantage of the fact, this is the slow voice trying to pull you back. Take advantage of the fact that our director is here to very briefly walk us into the choices at hand. Matt Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, everyone, for being here. In terms of the choices that we, as a staff, proposed in terms of dealing with our deficit, item one was increasing fares, fees, and fines, but all of you know that over the past 2 years, that's what we've been doing to try and close our deficit. So that has pretty much happened already, and the $30 million that is there was the senior youth and disabled pass, and clearly that was not something that anyone wanted to do. The item number two was to reduce the service by 10%. Clearly, smaller system, recognizing our budget deficit, it would be a whole lot easier to maintain and support and operate versus having a very large system that clearly we are having difficulty maintaining the vehicles and staffing in terms of operator staffing. So you end up with a de facto service cut in terms of unreliability on a daily basis versus a smaller system that we can really focus on and concentrate our service, our support to. Changing the work rules, that's related to our largest cost driver. It's the operator's salaries, and changing some of the work rules that have been there for decades in terms of their contract and doesn't allow us to be the most efficient operation. And then probably increasing the general fund subsidy. Just so you're well aware, we receive a portion of the general fund right now by charter. However, additional funding from the general fund will have negative impacts on some of the other city departments that are solely supported by the general fund. So those are the kind of four bullet issues. And our situation is not unique in terms of any transit system in this country. Everyone's raising fares, cutting service. Ours is a bit more difficult in the fact that we lost about $179 million in state funding over the last 3 years. So that's the big hole in our budget that we have to deal with and are experiencing right now.
I want to underscore that point. If the state did not make those cuts last 3 years, $179.1 million, we'd be running a surplus. We would have none of these discussions. But those are the cards that have been dealt. And that's why this is so difficult. And by the way, next year's proposal is about $78 million in cuts on top of the $179.1. We had a good suggestion out there, and I like this idea. Why don't we vote first on what your number one priority would be, and then we'll vote again on your number two priority. So why don't, again, all of you, grab that clicker, and what would, based on, again, this is a limited range of questions, but your number one priority in terms of addressing this $100+ million shortfall, what would it be? Number one. Yeah. Wow. Any members of the union here? All right. They'll appreciate we're going to ask your number 2 choice. Again, what would your number 2? You overwhelmingly have your number 1. If you could just chime in on your number 2 choice. If that choice was off the table, what would you do? Okay. Increase fares and reduce service. Boy, that'll make you all popular. All right, number 3. Put that back up, or you got it? Yeah, I'm curious what folks' third choice, so sort of the last choice. I'll do one more. What would be number 3 choice? You don't want to cut service, well, it depends what you vote. I don't want to mislead you. What would be your number 3? So thank you. Interesting. We'll look forward to pondering these recommendations, and we'll add them up on our tally board. And we will now quickly go to the next topic, Kate.
Which is the Department of Public Health. So the Department of Public Health is a very large department in San Francisco. As Greg mentioned to you at the beginning, we're a city and a county, which means we run a public health system. And our public health department spends about $1.2 billion a year to ensure the health of San Franciscans. We run 2 hospitals, the San Francisco General Hospital, and are about to open a brand new Laguna Honda Hospital, the largest long-term care facility in the state. We also run a primary care system, Healthy San Francisco, and a robust system of community and behavioral health services, which is things like mental health, drug abuse treatment, that sort of thing. This chart is just showing you where the general fund goes in the Department of Public Health. There's about $344 million of general fund in the Department of Public Health's budget. As you can see, the largest share goes to San Francisco General. And then the other categories are pretty evenly split: Laguna Honda Hospital, primary care, jail health services, public health, mental health, and substance abuse treatment, with a very small portion for health at home. Okay? So the largest share going to our institutions, followed by some community services. Remember, at your table you've got some fact sheets that give you information about each of these areas, and they give you pros and cons on each of the choices. So I would encourage you to take a look at those while you're having your conversations. The question we're going to ask you today, and I think the mayor is now walking over to the director of the Department of Public Health. He's nodding yes, and perhaps wants to ask Mitch to say something. Yeah, Dr. Katz.
Why don't we take it, we'll do this a little differently. Let me, before you get into the discussion, ask the director to try to lead us into discussion in terms of the enormity of the challenges he has. Mitch Katz, who is your health guru, the health czar in the city and county.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Well, I have been the health director for 12 and a half years, which means I've lived through at least 3 major cycles of down budgeting, and it is challenging for the health department. We're your largest city department. We have the most discretionary general fund, and maybe the hardest thing about health is that unlike some other services, there's no finite need. That's to say that the more health services you provide, generally, the more health services you will need to provide. It's a positive thing, but and many of you may reflect on that from your own experiences going to the doctor. You don't go to the doctor, maybe you get sicker, but you don't incur more expenses. You go to the doctor says, well, then you need a test. Doctor says you need a medicine. The more you go, the more the expenses increase. So healthcare is what economists refer to as a very elastic need. The more you provide, the more you probably need to provide. Making it even harder, and I think that's why the mayor and the budget director have phrased the next questions in terms of mental health and substance abuse. These are the areas where we receive very little state revenue. So although, if you look at the picture, we spend a lot at General Hospital, we get a lot of revenue for that. So most of the general fund isn't at General Hospital or at Laguna Honda or at Primary Care or in Healthy San Francisco. Those services almost completely pay for themselves. Almost all our discretionary money is in mental health and substance abuse through no fault of those programs, but that's the state doesn't pay. And so we run into an issue where it's the very people who feel the most vulnerable, those people who are struggling with substance abuse issues and mental health issues, who we want to provide services, but yet we wind up as a department recommending to cut those areas because San Francisco provides significantly more than other areas. There's no sort of set point that says, well, this is how much we should provide, and frankly, it just comes down to the fact that there's no state funding for these areas, and I hate to cut in the hospitals or the clinics where any cut of $1 means loss of $2 other dollars. And so I wind up always having to suggest to the mayor, who when I come into his office already, is like this, not wanting to see me, recommending further cuts on mental health and substance abuse because I know how he feels for those issues. On the other hand, as a director, it's very hard for me to recommend cutting revenue-producing services, and so I always wind up recommending to him, of your bad choices, I think you have to cut further in mental health or substance abuse. Thank you.
So those are the choices we're going to ask you to ponder and consider as we enter into our table this morning.
Mayor, get on the mic.
Exactly.
All right, so we're going to ask you to go into your small groups and think about the question, should the city make changes to mental health and substance abuse treatment services? Option 1, increase funding to provide additional services at a cost of $5 million. Option 2, reduce funding by 10% and get $14 million worth of savings. Option 3, consolidate certain services to gain efficiencies for a $2 million savings, or option 4, maintain current service levels, no savings. All right, go into your discussions, and I'll come to the back in just a minute.
Well, I haven't know how to cut costs. They reduced the number of detoxes in the city. They also reduced the number of programs where people can come in and access long-term care. They combined a couple of organizations. They took some of the programs out of agencies that were providing other services like HIV services, where you also had a connection to substance abuse within that same service, so they moved those to a central, location and then reduced the number of beds that were actually available for people that were coming in off the street. So that's what ended up happening with the last cut,
Well, I don't feel like any cut should be made because there's already a lot of homeless people. There's already a lot of mental health. Whenever people lose mental health, they end up on the street and homeless, and that's to drugs as well.
I think it's to our credit as a city that we have these services for people who need them. I don't want to cut very much, but the idea of consolidating services, it says there's a $2 million gain here, in the deficit. I think that's worth looking into because we may be able to close down certain locations and still provide the same service to people if they walk a little further. And so I'd like to try that, but without jeopardizing the high quality. It's not high enough, but the quality that we provide for people who need it.
concern I'm wondering if the federal government can't help out with substance abuse services, since it feeds into so much of the other issues that we have in the city, especially as it relates to health and crime. We haven't heard from the sheriff's department, and I'm not even sure if it's included in here. I don't see a page here for the sheriff's department, but that's huge. The issue of maintaining people who are committing drug-related crimes, here in the city is huge. We continue to increase with the problem. Right.
Yeah. Big problem, though. It's why do we have so many people who are taking these substances, and it's ruining not only our city, but our country and our world.
And that's why I think the federal government should be more involved in this and not actually have to depend on the state only.
It's hard to find a two-pronged approach. If you consolidate services, you also have to do public education or public outreach or some way to help the problem from getting started or prevent the problem from getting started.
Yeah. We need to deal with the cause.
We need a double-pronged approach.
Well, the stopgap, this is just, we hope temporary. If the economy improves, maybe we'll be able to raise more revenues just through better economy. I mean, I'm hoping this is a stopgap. So if we're thinking we're going to consolidate some services for several years, but not make draconian cuts, I think it's better for our city.
Most people are having difficulty coping with life. That's what gets. And so when you reduce the number of jobs that are available, when you reduce the number of services that are available to support people who are trying to maintain families, and move through the city, increase the fares, it makes it very difficult. And cuts to education.
Just as I am looking at the time, we're right where we should be. So let's keep it up. Everyone's doing a great job.
We're at the right pace here. So you heard from Dr. Mitch Katz, who framed the table discussion. You've heard from your friends and neighbors, or people you may not necessarily like so much, but you're still working through to decide if that person is I should spend any more time with them, or is this it? I'm hoping some friends come out of this, right? Lynn, I'm counting on you. All right. Lynn's happy with her table. So let's do the same idea. We'll do not just what's your one, but let's do number 1 and 2. We'll just limit it to that. Again, we're on the issue of mental health and substance abuse. I know it's unfair that we're just doing this, but I want to hear from you. Do we want to increase funding because we need more substance abuse treatment, we need more mental health, but in turn increase the budget deficit, want to reduce funding, save about $14 million in general fund, consolidate and find efficiencies? You may not save as much money, but you do save some. Or do you want to just say, hey, this is why I came here. We got to maintain the services. I recognize we can't spend more, but let's at least hold the line. So if you could grab those things. What do you call those things? Clickers. Yes, I won't say I went to public school because I went to private school. That's why I should have gone to public school. Exactly. Well, let's click in. Consolidation. Mitch? Pretty overwhelming. Why don't we give you all a second chance? What your number 2 priority would be. Again, increase funding, reduce funding, consolidate, or to maintain current service levels. Grab your clickers and vote. Pretty evenly split. All right, Mitch. Yeah, any quick thoughts? Because I know this, at the end of the day, this Dr. Katz wasn't exaggerating. This is the toughest budget for me every single year. This one weighs most heavily, and I know it does on Dr. Katz and his commission. Just any thoughts about that?
Well, just pass on what we talked about here. Part of the challenge is that we do believe that increases in funding for mental health and substance abuse do have an effect on crime, and that's a very expensive part of city government, but very hard to tie together. So that if we did a better job on mental health and substance abuse, we could decrease costs probably in jails and courts for the police department, but there's not an easy way to tie those two things together.
But what the doctor has done is tied in our conversation so brilliantly by giving us the following segue. Greg? Public safety.
And speaking of public safety. So I just, before we jump into this, I just do want to note, I know that many of you have been filling out those blue cards on the table, and we're collecting them up front, and we've been looking through them. So if you have suggestions that you want to submit to us, just write them on those cards, and we're passing them around and looking at them. Surprising number of comments about the botanical gardens for some reason. So public safety, as we saw before, public safety is the largest single area of the city's general fund budget. These are departments that you're familiar with. The chief of the juvenile probation department scolded me because last time I didn't list his department, so I will list him first this time. So juvenile probation, the police department, adult probation, the district attorney and public defender, the fire department, the Department of Emergency Management, the sheriff, and the courts. The next slide. So this is how the funding breaks out in our general fund public safety departments. The police department is, perhaps not surprisingly, the largest department in the city's public safety areas at 41%. Second is the fire department at 22%. And the sheriff, which runs our jails, is the next largest. So those are the largest proportionally parts of this area that we're looking at. So we're going to focus on two of these areas, the police department and the fire department, with your votes. So let's jump into the question. So this is about the police department, and again, we're going to ask you how you would prioritize police services. We're going to ask you if you would like to increase funding for the police department, again, which will increase our general fund deficit, but we'll have the equivalent of about 50 additional police officers on the street. You can decrease funding by the same amount, which will save us money but reduce the number of dollars available for police staffing. You can maintain the status quo, or you can choose a different option, which has been discussed a lot at City Hall over the past many years, which is to use civilians instead of uniform officers to provide certain administrative services at the departments. That doesn't save us as much, but it doesn't have the same impact on the level of service as the larger reduction. So let's go ahead and vote.
Well, wait one second.
Discuss.
Wait one second. You got a police chief here, and we might as well ask the chief not to steer the conversation, but to objectively offer an overview to help illuminate us as we enter into the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Police department budget is roughly, as it is projected for next year, it will be roughly about $370 million of general fund, and there's another 40 or 50 that are contract work, grants, the airport. About 90% of our budget is people, so understand that any reduction in police services are going to come directly from people. We have made significant reductions already this year. We have reduced our overtime. In the areas where we're able to, we have already reduced other workplace rules that are not driven by the contract. Basically, our services are driven by several pressure points, if you will. The primary is the response to calls for services, and I kind of clump that into two areas. One is the police cars responding to your radio calls, and then the second piece is a follow-up, the investigation to whatever is generated from this part. The second part that we have is we have a special events, and this is a special events-rich city. And most of them are not, there's, you know, the people that are putting these events together are not necessarily reimbursing the city for the cost. And many times there's a great deal of police services, emergency services, obviously fire. So that's an area that is very, very expensive for the city. And frankly, we have events almost every month. And it's the fabric of the city. And then finally, an area that I personally find important, and one that quite frankly we never fund enough, which is the prevention and the intervention. School resource officers, working with the youth and intervening with gangs. Quite frankly, in the area of policing, an ounce of prevention goes a long way. And we're not doing nearly enough what we need to do there, but we always have to revert back to the basic services, that we got to respond to the 911 calls. We need to deal with the crimes of violence. And then there's an area here that becomes a little nuanced, and this is the one, quite frankly, that I get most of the complaints from, and it's the public, the quality of life stuff, okay? Sit and lie, whether you have people that are blocking your sidewalks, whether you have graffiti in your neighborhoods, aggressive panhandling, a lot of the petty type crimes that generally are the ones that most of the community gets impacted by. Luckily, most people are not the victim of a homicide or a shooting, but most of us do sometimes become the victim of the lower level crimes. And yeah, that's the area that sometimes we have to pull back as we reduce the number of services. So it really becomes a balancing act for you. You also need to realize that our services in many parts of the city have a direct impact on the economic well-being of the city. In fact, there are some chiefs of police around the country, like Bill Bratton, one of my mentors, that would tell you that policing is an investment. And we certainly saw that occur in the city of LA, and I saw it to some level in Arizona when I went to Arizona. Now, if you put that in the context of San Francisco, this is it's a city that is heavily driven economically by the hospitality industry, tourism. And I can tell you this is another area that I get complaints, and I'm very concerned. When I get a tourist that tells me, hey, I came into the city and I will never go back to your city, and I would tell my friends not to go back to your city, that is very concerning to me. Because quite frankly, if our hospitality industry does not do well, all the largesse that we have in the city, all the social services that we provide, which by the way, we provide more than most other cities around the country per capita, will eventually have to be reduced even more, because the economic engine that drives the ability to pay for the services is sometimes predicated on people coming and spending their money here. So if we do not provide a safe and a pleasant environment for people to come in and pay those very large bed taxes that people pay to stay in our hotels and frequent our restaurants and all those other places, then that eventually will directly impact the quality of everything else that we do. So I think it's really important to recognize that we have to be good to our businesses, and for some reason there seems to be almost forgotten here that money doesn't just come in freely, and sometimes being good to our businesses is providing a safe environment. So I want to put that into your radar screen. Having said all that, we are definitely moving towards the increasing efficiencies in the police department. I'm a strong advocate of looking for different business models where we have more civilians doing some of the things that are being done by sworn officers today. But some of that stuff, frankly, is not going to give us a reduction this year. This is more long-term stuff. This is a 3-5-year strategic plan, and we're moving in that direction. But that's not going to solve the $522 million budget problem that the mayor has and that we have to deal with. So.
All right. With that, why don't we enter into some conversations, and we'll start the vote. Thanks, Chief.
That's my guy.
You guys feel about this one?
It's not an area where I want to decrease funding.
I don't think we want to decrease funding, but using the building work.
That makes sense to me.
about before. Do you guys have any questions you'd like us to get directly to our budget director?
Yeah, but that is such a small portion of the homeless are being moved into the SRO where it's a month-to-month candidacy. So what he's talking about
A lot of this median housing comes from general fund revenues that are in turn driven a lot by tourist dollars. So I don't think he was at all saying tourists are more important. He's just recognizing that if we don't have a healthy tourist economy, we don't have a healthy revenue base to pay for all these social services that we all think are important.
People don't come in the summer to spring. But I also think, having known him for the short time that he's here, both of us, that I think he is also really concerned about community policing and making sure that streets are safe in neighborhoods.
And also when he was talking about that paragraph that he was saying, basically what I got from that is let's oppress the poor and so that the rich can have more access to the streets and the sidewalks.
I completely disagree. One of his first actions was to dispatch more patrol officers in the Tenderloin within 1,500 feet of schools to get the drug dealers prosecuted. Are they being prosecuted? Is the prosecution even included in this police?
And that's not part of it. That's a completely separate department. And so, yeah, I mean,
I'd like to see more police officers. Most of the people I want to see more police officers out there are coming from outside of San Francisco. Yeah, coming in, they're preying on the poor people.
But that's drug crime, and that's like drug dealing. We're not talking about sit in line.
It's actually, it's both. It's drug crime, and it's also the violent crime with guns.
Right, but that's not sit in line. That's not sit in line.
That's what?
That's not sit in line. That's not the homeless people that are getting arrested for sit in line.
Oh, no.
Right. So basically sit in line is an oppressive discriminatory law, in my opinion.
Well, they're talking right now. It's not a law here. Specifically in the lower end.
You have to remember, especially with that population that's most distressed, the homeless population, San Francisco has done more than any other city in the nation. Has been a model for every city in the nation. That whole philosophy about our city being a state presence.
We've done more in the past, but that's slowing and stopping now.
Well, look at where we are budgeted. Money has stayed on homeless programs. I just been very careful about that. So, yeah, very protective. The mayor has been very protective of this.
But I mean, it's not just the homeless; it's also like low-income residents.
Okay, get your votes in.
Clickers in hand. And we will do the top choice, and then we will do your second choice. How should the city adjust funding for the police department? Increase funding? Decrease funding? Maintain funding? Or, number 4, restructure using more civilians instead of sworn officers for administrative duties. Given that limited range of choices, what is your top choice? And again, we will vote on your second choice in a moment. What's your top choice? Please vote. That's because the chief made such a strong case. I don't know if they're... But clearly, that stands out. Now, if that was your first choice, and we took that off the table, what would be your second choice? Maintain funding. We're going to keep in the public safety theme by now transitioning to the issue that Chief Joanne Hayes White cares most about, besides her 3 kids, and that's the fire department. And we will ask Greg and
Kate to lead us in that discussion, and then the chief will very briefly connect us to the tabletop discussion, and then we will vote. Greg?
Thanks again. As I said earlier, the fire department is the second largest department in the public safety area. You all know, I think, pretty well what they do. So I'll just pass it on to Chief Hayes White, and then we'll get to discussion.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Very briefly, we have 42 stations in the city and county of San Francisco. That includes one over at Treasure Island. In 2004, as a new chief, recently at the time appointed by Mayor Newsom, we went ahead and did a trial rotating brownout, which did save the city some money, provided for some sleepless nights for me, was not very popular. It did save about $6 million annually. This looks like up here we have some options. If we were to do that again, it would be in violation of Proposition F that went through and was promoted very heavily, supported by the mayor and promoted by Firefighters Union 798. Obviously, the more resources you have, the safer you're going to be. But just a few comments. Some people, and I saw in the data that was provided, we do have more fire stations per square mile. There is good reason for that. San Francisco is, they say, a city that's more like the East Coast. It's very densely populated. Many of the structures are built well before 1950. As you know, the city has structures that have zero lot line separation in many areas of the city. Dwellings are attached. If there's a fire that gets going, you need to make a rapid and aggressive fire attack, or else you're likely to lose more and more property. We also have hills, windy conditions. We're seismically vulnerable. So there's good reason for the staffing that we have. Under challenging economic times like this, there are thoughts about what it would look like if you took away some of that staffing. It looks like the decrease of staffing by 5% would be approximately 4 less fire engines on the streets every day. That's about 16 less personnel working 24/7 in your city. The second option is kind of a midway option, decreasing staffing by 2.5%. That would be 2 engine companies or 8 personnel. Like I said, it seems to be, and because Proposition F was overwhelmingly supported by the voters, people like their neighborhood firehouses. Our members are very well trained. Our operating budget is about $275 million, of which about $30 million comes from the state. Other than that, everything is general funded, and I think we've done a good job over the last 7 budget cycles. Each year we have reduced. It does seem counterintuitive somewhat because the budget goes up, but the reason the budget goes up is mostly due to cost of living adjustments and MOU negotiated raises, which is going to be up for discussion once again this year. So that's it from the fire department.
All right. So, Greg, now time to
discuss.
One more thing that makes my life challenging.
More advocacy.
91% of that $275 million goes out the door to salary. 9% pays for all your fire engines, your fire trucks, our stations, our computers. So that's what makes it difficult.
All right, so let's go ahead and discuss how you want to vote, and we'll let you know when it's time to use the clicker.
I think it's a state requirement. It happens everywhere. Yeah. I don't know.
A lot of times, a friend of mine collapsed, and they had a fire wagon come and an ambulance come, and I don't understand.
I think part of it also has to do with the 911 call, that it's very possible they might have to actually break down a door or something like that, and they have to have fire.
So is to sort of efficientize that situation. I'll make up a word.
You're a high school teacher, you can make words up.
I speak a couple of other languages. I know. Seems like the number one option is
One other thing to say is that, in a lot of other local jurisdictions, they have cuts to make, but they're not having the choices that we have because they don't control the human service programs. That's the other thing, is that because we are both a city and a county, and so they are cutting from in some respects, a smaller pot.
So decreased staffing, 5%, 2.5%, other ideas?
So if we go in violation of Proposition F, what happens? What are the consequences? Did Proposition F provide any funding for any of this?
Voted on it, it said this is the fiscal impact. So the voters knew what the fiscal impact was when they voted on Prop F.
Caution to the wind. This is how it's got to be. Yeah, that's... When I first moved to California, the proposition system made me scratch my head a little bit. I'll just leave it at that.
Yep. It's fascinating. So they do explain it. I mean, Proposition F.
They seem to be running quite efficiently.
In a city that has earthquakes and,
I see this as insurance, right? I mean, this is very much, something goes wrong, you want them there to take care of it, right? You hope to never have to call on it, but when you do, you want it there. Yep.
What is that? Hours per week.
We promise to keep you on time to get on to the rest of your day, because I know Saturdays are valuable. You could join me at 1 at the census press conference, though, if you want to go to Chinese New Year later. We've got 2 banquet dinners. Happy if you join me there. Otherwise, I would argue to spend time with your family today. Public safety. So House of the Fire Department, again, limited choices. You got 42 firehouses. The voters have overwhelmingly said don't shut any of them down, even these rolling brownouts, which we could explain at another time what those are, but we want to just make this simple. Your number one choice, you want to decrease staffing. You want to save $10 million. We don't, under the circumstances, we can do without 5% of our staffing. You want to decrease staffing, not as much, 2.5%. We save half the money, but that may make more sense under the circumstances, or not a chance. I got a fire station next door or down the block, and I want to keep it. I love those guys and girls and don't want to touch it. So what is your number one choice? Given those options, grab your clickers and give us your thoughts. I'm voting. Thanks a lot.
Split right in 3 ways.
All right. Well, this is why we do a second choice. Since you couldn't make up your collective mind, why don't we all vote on our second choice, given these 3. Grab those clickers. I'm trying to manipulate the vote. All right. So you want to decrease, but not by much. Chief loves this. She thought that was great. Thank you, all of you. Let's move into recreation and park, because it seems appropriate considering where we are. And Kate, why don't you walk us through just some broad overview, and then I will, since my department head had to leave, I'll chime in on some thoughts.
So San Francisco has a really robust set of departments and services in recreation and culture. I have to walk away from that because it's making noise. So this is the list of departments that are included in Culture and Recreation: the Asian Art Museum, Arts Commission, Fine Arts Museum, so that's the DeYoung and the Legion of Honor, the Public Library, the Law Library, Recreation and Park, the Academy of Sciences, and finally the War Memorial. If we do the next slide, we can see who gets how much money. So overall, we spend about $51 million of general fund each year on recreation and culture. Remember that the Recreation and Park Department gets open space fund and has money from other non-general fund sources, just like our museums do. So here you can see 66% of our general fund budget for culture and recreation goes to Rec and Park. Mr. Mayor, would you like to chime in with a few thoughts?
Well, who do we have here from Rec and Park that wants to look? Let's have a smiling face running out the door.
All right.
That's
Don
exactly.
Kamelanathan.
All right. I know how enthusiastic. Thank you for letting us in today.
No problem. I want to welcome everyone to the Botanical Garden. We're very happy to see you here today and in participating in this important conversation. My name is Dawn Kamelanathan. I am the Planning Director for the Recreation and Park Department, pinch hitting for our Finance Officer and Department Head today. The Recreation and Park Department has over 3,000 acres of land, 200 parks, and over 400 built facilities. Around 800 employees to take care of all of that. A few years ago, we did a deficit analysis that showed we were about 200 gardeners short in terms of having the staffing, the maintenance staffing that we need to take care of all of these assets. So the department has a wide variety of mandates that it needs to meet. An incredible amount of land. We are the largest landowner in San Francisco, and increasingly limited resources to meet those needs. And so we're constantly faced with, I have to catch my breath because I actually just ran in from the parking lot. We're constantly faced with trying to make some very difficult trade-offs within our own operations between how much we spend on providing recreation services, for example, at our recreation centers. Those are the things like Tiny Tots programs, latchkey, aerobics classes, and then the maintenance needs. Again, they're taking care of all of our acreage. So those are the key kinds of choices that we have to make on an annual basis. And in the coming year, we're really trying to pursue a strategy that isn't just about reductions, but is also about increasing our revenues, because we do have these fabulous assets, and we need to do a better job of marketing them, and then also using those resources to leverage additional resources for the department. So the coming year's budget proposal really is a split between reductions in service and also new revenue proposals. So that would be it.
Just quickly explain, for the purpose of the tabletop discussions, some of these things, very briefly.
Sure.
What they would mean.
I can certainly give that a shot. In terms of maintaining existing services, I think that's fairly straightforward. Continuing to provide the level of recreation services and park maintenance across the city. We do have maintenance standards that voters set, Prop C maintenance standards, and we've done a good job over the past 3 years with the resources we have of increasing our scores actually from about 75% to meeting 90%. So that's a huge leap forward with the existing resources we have. Reorganizing the recreation and gardening services. You know, we have all these properties and all these buildings, and there's really a question about whether it's the most efficient way to deliver our recreational services in particular. San Francisco is actually a very small city, and yet we have all these recreation centers and clubhouses, and we're really thinking through the opportunities we have to consolidate services in more central locations and at the same time increase services at those locations, so that there actually are ways to achieve some efficiencies here without necessarily the public feeling a huge impact to those services. Increasing fees and other revenues. Again, these are things like over the past year we've put out an RFP for push carts at our parks, right? Who wouldn't want to have a Bi-Ride or a Delfina cart at Mission Dolores on a sunny day? So these are the types of things that we're starting to look at. And also with our clubhouses, we have over 20 of these buildings. They are very charming, many of them, and yet we can't afford to keep them staffed at the levels they have been historically. So are there ways to rent out those facilities and, again, generate additional revenue for the department? And implementing all the options includes I think that's really the budget proposal we have for the coming year, of doing this combination, again, of revenue strategies and also cost reductions.
Who needs a director when we have you? Thank you. Why don't we enter into table conversations, and we'll get to votes.
We do all the time. We have teams of folks. I mean, a perfect example in the jails, we do acupuncture, we do substance abuse treatment, we do mental health. We have programs where people come out of the jail and are re-entered in the system, where we're collaborating quite directly with those departments. And we have our prevention programs and diversion programs from the courts, like drug court, the mental health court, and other prevention drug treatment programs that keep people out, like the Community Justice Center. So we do have these collaboratives, we do have these departmental meetings that we have pretty consistently around topic areas that focus on prevention, focus on intervention, and focus then on the larger issues of when people are incarcerated, that we create a pattern interrupt so that they don't go back into that system.
But that's prevention from going into incarceration in the first place. And so I understand that there are programs in the jails already that support people not going back into the same experience, but that's exactly what happens. They get released back into the same environment that they left from, you know.
No, we have, that's why the courts, we try to keep them out of jail in the first place with our Prop 36 diversion programs and other things.
I wanted to speak up for this topic, which is the recreation topic. I'm here on behalf of wanting to have fees for the Botanical Garden. We have treasures here in this city that attract people from all over the world, and because some people have this thing not in my backyard, this garden, I want access to it for free, and everybody else has access. We're not taking care of what we have, and that's what makes our city an attractive city. So I think raising fees for the treasures that we have is a possibility to help maintain them without cutting the quality of life. And I think we can do a combination of things, and that the people in the budget office and those directors know where we can make cuts.
Let's say, why can't we get private funding like New York does for Central Park to help pay for building the park?
Corporate sponsorship for some of the gardens here at the Botanical Garden.
There is some corporate sponsorship.
No, let's solicit corporate sponsorship. Because we can't maintain this treasure with reducing revenues. And we're not asking the city for more money. We're just saying, let us charge an admission fee like the tea garden for non-residents. That would enforce the fee for non-residents, as we discussed, is the enforceability of this. How are you going to do that?
We do it.
Remember that statement? We do it for public library ATMs years ago. I mean, there are things that are not enforceable.
We have, for example, we have significant discounts on our golf courses like Harding, libraries, and we have city ID cards now. Thousands and thousands of people taking advantage, so people can avail themselves as residents and resident cards. So we're trying to make that easier and more accessible. But
should the city adjust funding for recreation purposes?
Should the city grab your clickers? Should the city adjust funding the Recreation and Parks Department, again, dealing with reality in the budget deficit by maintaining existing services and making no cuts, reorganization of our rec services as well as our gardening services, increase fees and other revenues so we can maintain some of those services, or implement all of the above and organize the restructuring. With that in mind, again, we'll do your number one choice, and then we'll do number two. If you could begin by clicking in now. Yeah, I thought the bottom one would be higher. But that's interesting. So increase fees and implement more fees and reorg and maintain services, all of the above. Interesting. So with that in mind, number 2, your number 2 choice, let's look, if given only one of the other 3 options, which of the other 3 would you choose? Increase fees and reorganize services. All right, this is helpful, but it goes to the sort of broad and mixed feelings that a lot of you have in this room. We're going to move quickly to the exciting topic of general administration. I know what you're thinking. This is why I came here. What's going on at City Hall and elsewhere, the Assessor Recorder's Office, City Attorney, City Planning, all of these administrative agencies. Greg?
So, as the mayor said, a lot of the things that are in this this sort of classification within government are a lot of the core governance institutions. Not always the flashiest and most exciting departments, but nonetheless, a lot of the departments that provide some of the core institutions that allow the city to run. Let's go next. So you can get a little bit of a look at what the departments are and how they contribute to this area of government. The city administrator's office is a collection of a number of smaller departments that provide general services for the city, and we have a number of other departments.
You may want to notice the mayor's office is half the size of the Board of Supervisors, just for the record. I just offer that as a point of consideration today.
Just pointing out facts. So what we're going to ask you about is not something that's necessarily specific to the general administration and finance area, but it's something about how we generally operate our government. Over half of our city budget is in staffing. It's in the cost of salaries and benefits that we pay to city employees. City government really is a personnel-based endeavor. It's people. And so when we look at our budget, we have to look at what some of our options are related to our number one cost, which is people. So we have a couple of options here for you, and we want to get your thoughts on some of the options that we have with regard to city employees and some of the options that we can take on in the budget deficit. The first option is right now most employees in city government are full-time. They work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. One option that has been on the table is to change that so that instead of using full-time positions, we use more part-time positions. We have more city employees working a 7.5-hour day instead of a 8-hour day. That's a 37.5-hour week. If we did that applied that fairly broadly to city employees, that could generate about $50 million worth of savings to the city's general fund. Another option that is always debated in San Francisco and elsewhere is we have an option under the city charter to, when it's cheaper to do so, use outside contractors to provide a service instead of city employees. So it's contracting out services to use a private or nonprofit provider instead of using civil service employees to provide that service. It saves us money. Lastly, we can just cut city employees. We can just do layoffs, have fewer employees. This saves us money, clearly, but it has an impact on services. And so the option we've got up here is just to give you a sense of how the numbers stack up, what the savings would be from just eliminating 500 city jobs. And we've also got the all of the above and the none of the above. So let's go ahead and discuss, unless you want to add anything.
Let's discuss this, and I'll briefly then segue after the discussion into going through these one more time. But Why don't we move quickly through this so we can get to what your appetite is for taxes coming up next.
It works.
But those are kind of specialized jobs. If you look across the vast majority, we tend to be marginally over market.
Okay.
And it tends to actually be, we've made conscious decisions as a government over time to compensate our lower wage employees more competitively. So actually it's at the bottom end of the wage scale that our wages tend to be the most over market for all sorts of historical reasons, and it's government trying to provide a ladder into the middle class conversations that stretch back 20 years.
And would doing reductions to the work week impact benefits as well?
Wouldn't have an impact on benefits, just on pay.
Okay.
So if the three of us were to each work half an hour less a day, or get paid for half an hour less to work a day, it would, in essence, be the equivalent of a 6% pay reduction. But our benefits would remain unchanged.
Okay.
So it seems to me like there's a lot of waste. For example, I understood that Gavin Newsom had his vehicle transported to a wedding, I think in Montana, and all the way back. And then also people security staff were following him around the state that the taxpayers were paying for. And I just wonder, I think maybe, we could cut off 10% of his budget just by eliminating that type of waste. He personally should be reimbursing the city for that, I feel. And all the other officials that are doing this type of stuff should stop. We really need to have fiscal responsibility on behalf of the staff, and these people have to stop looking at the city budget as a personal trust fund. And I think that alone, if they had that personal responsibility, could eliminate a lot of the...
I don't think that's one of the choices here.
I know it's not my choice because it's too bright.
Well, my concern about down people's hours is that next year, maybe or 3 years from now, when things get back, now we have all these staff workers who don't want to work for the city because the city only pays you for 7.5 hours a week, or 7.5 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day. And so that's one of those things that I feel like you can cut and it's hard to rebound, right? I mean, it's hard to then say, okay, now we're going to pay everybody fully. And I think it contributes a lot to people being underemployed, which is kind of the biggest problem, or one of the biggest employment problems that we're having now, is that people aren't just not employed, but they're underemployed. And so, while it's a lot of money, it seems like a long-term, not so great solution.
And is this essentially across the board? Generally
about
speaking?
half of city employees.
Okay.
I think is what that number looks like.
Once again, I feel like
One thing that's not on here are the pension costs. And the pension costs. Because the city has the defined benefit. The city has to pay for retirement benefits irrespective of the economy.
Because I do this at peril of perhaps misleading you a little bit, or at least leading you in one direction over the other. We have proposed, and you may have seen some big headlines about the idea of looking at a 37.5-hour part-time employment opportunity. Lawyers, that's called a mayor being lawyered up. That's lawyer language. I won't bore you why I have to say what I have to say. The idea would be to save a lot of positions, number one. See, we can lay off thousands of people, or we can keep them employed, but we ask them to have a shorter week so they can keep their medical benefits and some others, keep their job. It's just an interesting approach. Now, wasn't that well received, candidly, by labor? I think the word outrageous was used. Unconscionable was used. Draconian was used. Along those lines, good people can disagree. I'm just trying to now be fair. But that's one option. The other is equally controversial, that we can contract out city services, that we don't need city employees to do the work while the private sector do the work for us. And in some cases, some can argue, you save money. In other cases, people say, no, it costs us more money because the private sector is for-profit, the public sector is non-profit. So why would for-profit save us money when the big non-profit, the city, with all its leverage, save money? But we have a contracting out process that, quote-unquote, certifies that it will save us money. But this is very controversial. That's number two. Back to layoffs. Just make it easy. You know, have people work 40 hours. We can't reduce that work week in any way. Let's just make the tough choices we can do with less services in some cases, but we just have to bite the proverbial apple and move on. That's the number three. All the above, it's, well, how are you going to get to balance? And I don't even want to show you the board on how much progress we've made, guys. But we got a big hole, and we may not have a choice but to do 37.5 hours and do contracting out and do layoffs. And there gives you the big savings. Now we're getting into really solving this problem. By the way, you're at $499 million right now. Or none of the above. This is not right. We're not going to balance the budget on the back of our city employees. They've sacrificed too much. There's been layoffs in the past. They've given back contributions. We're not going to pit city services against city employees. That's wrong. And that's number five. But we don't necessarily get any savings. So we have a math problem. Let me know right now what you think we should do by picking up your clicker, by giving me your first choice, and then I'm going to ask for the second choice, and I'm going to be so bold as to ask for a third because I think I need to know deeply where you are. So know you got three choices. Let's start with number one. What's your number one choice on this list? Wow. That's exactly why, as the head of our Public Utilities Commission, former controller, said we need a second one. Let's now do let's ask you for number two. You don't have that first choice. You have other three choices. What would that other choice be? Please click in. She has a conflict. I understand. You have a conflict too. All right. Let's give it one more chance. Take off your top two, and you're limited to just three other choices. What would that choice be? So where does that put our new number? So roughly, based on that, based on what you've done so far, we have reduced our budget deficit from $522.2 million down to $449 million. That's pretty good progress because we didn't give you the entire amount to cut of $500 million anyway. So I don't want to mislead you by suggesting that we haven't made progress, but you've made some good progress there. But we still have a gap, don't we? And that's why we think we have to have an honest discussion about revenue. Because we've been focused on the expenditure side and cuts. I did skip one in the interest of time, and that's human services. And I do apologize, but I promised you to get you out. So I know that is glaring. When you walk out, you go, why? That's why in the interest of time. But let's talk revenue. And I want to just get right into this. Some people say, well, let's just increase taxes. Why don't we don't have to make tough choices. We can just get more revenue. Maybe a tough choice, but, you know, it's a progressive city. If we want all these services, we're going to have to pay for them. So the option is, We got a sales tax of 9.5%. Why don't we just go up to 10%? And that will generate $63 million in new revenue for substance abuse, for police and fire, for recreation and parks. Or others say, no, no, no. I'm already paying too much in sales tax. It's a regressive tax. 9.5% is outrageous already. I'm not paying 10% for groceries anymore. Let's go after those tourists and our family. When they come into town, we don't want them staying with us anyway. Let's increase the hotel tax from 14% where it currently is. Let's put it up to 15%. That will get us $10 million. Others say, well, we can do that, but we also need to go out. All these businesses, always complaining businesses, you know, they need to pay their fair share. So let's increase the cost of employing someone, which currently is 1.5%. Let's increase it modestly to just 1.6%. Generates $22 million. We can save those city employees. We don't have to contract out services, and we can keep some of our rec centers open for the current hours they're operating. Let's ask businesses to step up. Or you say, no, how about this? Utilities users tax. For residences, we don't have one. Some will call this a carbon tax. That's when you turn on your lights. It's a percentage of that bill. And we could create one. Commercial has it. Why don't residents have it? And why don't we create one, just 1%, and that would generate $12 million. It's an energy use tax. So again, back to some good environmental arguments. Some say, this is outrageous. We fought this fight 10 years ago. We defeated this, and how dare they even bring it back up? Or, number 5, we're paying plenty in tax. And I don't want to pay any more. With all due respect, live within your means. We've given you guidance. Make the decisions. That's what you're paid for. It's not a popularity contest. Live with that. So that's where we thought we'd offer you those. There are about 15 more. Some say let's do an income tax in the city. By the way, we can't, but some still say let's do one. Some suggest increases in property taxes, parcel taxes, and some say property transfer taxes we should increase. A lot of other ideas. And we have some of those, I think, even on the next slide, right? Fees. Another form of tax, but we don't have to call it a tax. It makes us feel better. And it also is legal. So let's just start with here. I know it's limited because some of you want some other tax options, but let's start here. And I'm going to, again, we're going to do 1, 2, 3 here. If we were going to tax or not, again, you can always vote for number 5. What would be your top choice? Given what you know, we're $449 million short. You see the trade-offs and all the other things you've done. Which revenue do you prefer? Pick up your clickers and log in now. I have no idea what you're going to do. Except 5, perhaps. Yeah. So you don't like your family much, huh? Sales tax and hotel tax. All right. Take whatever you picked first, take it off the table. All right. You know you may not like it, and give me your second choice with the 4 remaining. And finally, take the top 2 choices off. You've got 3 remaining. As difficult as it is, give us your third choice. Payroll tax. All right. But only a few of you said don't do anything. So as a consequence of that, we've kind of analyzed that we've just dropped our deficit from 449 down to 438-ish, 438.6. Some progress. Well done. But not enough. So that gives us the next slide. Which of the following fees should be increased? To the extent, again, it's all limited to these options. If you believe that there should be a fee, you don't have to. You say none of the above. Do we charge? And we thought we'd see what you thought about a couple of these ideas. A calorically sweetened beverage fee. Big issue of obesity. We have a campaign say, don't pour on the pounds. It's in the back of Muni buses. And I do want to remind you, beware what you drink. And I don't just mean adult beverages. I mean big gulps. Well, what's the point? We might as well have a pizza instead of a big gulp. At least I'd prefer one. All those calories. So if there's a cost to obesity, it increases the health department costs, decreases workforce productivity. Why not do what they did to tobacco products and charge a little fee? But you say, well, that's not right. It is adult beverages that are the real problem. What is this nonsense about Slurpees? Why don't we get into the cost of beer in all these bars, more people, drunk driving, all these accidents? That's the real driver of criminal justice costs and the real driver of domestic violence, real driver of crime and violence. Let's get serious about alcohol and do that instead. And some of you say, what the heck is this nanny state with sodas? You are a nut. And alcohol, enough is enough. And you say, let's go back to rec facilities and rec centers, increase cost of pools and going into the botanical gardens. Or you say, man, let's bring it on. I like all of these, or I like none of these. There were a couple of you that had brief questions, and because we're getting close to the end, I'll indulge.
My question is just how much do you expect to gain from each of these taxes?
Well, why do you ask such a good question? Not a lot of money. About $3-ish million for number one. A lot more for number two, though we are in the middle of analyzing it. It has what they call a nexus that is being done. There's a nexus study that's being done. We did it for the soda. We haven't done it yet for the alcohol. And the others will generate arguably hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in the low millions, Greg, correct? We got two more questions, and then we're going to get to the vote.
Why is the alcohol and beverage tax only 5 cents when it generates more problems than any of the others?
So you want to say it, and that's a legitimate question. Why only 5 cents? So you can make it 3, you can make it 6 million by doing 10 cents. Hell, we make it 20 million by going up, and by the way, that's legit. So why don't we take it in that spirit, that if you believe it should go up, and we'll just take it in the spirit of 5 cents plus, or on both alcohol thing, then I'll get that sense and indication from you. Sir. Yeah, and that's a good point, and that's being analyzed in that Nexus study, and we'll determine what the cost of collection and organizing it and enforcing it and the like every collection. Any one final question so we can do this, so I can try to get you out without you guys all getting angry at me.
What about imposing higher fees for driver's license and bad drivers?
He doesn't drive. But that's fair. We can do that. I mean, again, we can put a bunch. There's some things you legally can do and some things you can't do. When it comes to moving vehicles, mostly state enforced, state feed. I mean, vehicle license fee is one of them, right? Remember Governor Schwarzenegger signed a executive order to roll back the vehicle license fee, which used to be 2% of the car. Now it's 0.65%. Though they're It went up with the deal that made with the legislature to 1.15%. But that's cost, by the way, because we rolled it back, which everyone said, great. It's cost us over $30 billion in the state. Just that one executive order. And that was a way of directing a corollary between driving and the like. Sir, and then we'll get to the...
Would 1 and 2 automatically raise sales tax revenues also?
By definition, they would, wouldn't they not? Or would they? It's a sales tax probably wouldn't apply on other fees associated with the product, but a very, very interesting question. And we'll do final. Now I'm breaking my rules. All right, last one.
What about a toll on non-commercial vehicles going into downtown?
Yeah. There is a proposal to do a congestion pricing fee for cars that come into the city and county of San Francisco. That's being studied. It was a federal grant. We received about $1 million to study this a year and a half ago. You may recall Mayor Bloomberg in New York proposed this. In Manhattan, it's done in Stockholm, it's done in London, and it's done in Singapore. In fact, it originated in Singapore, and it's being proposed here in San Francisco, but it's some time off, and I see heads shaking, going, don't do that to us either. It's another controversial one, but good people can disagree. So let's talk about that disagreement in the context of your vote. Pick up the clicker and let me know your number one choice on this very limited list. We were all so peaceful up until now. All right, take those off. And let's start back. Take out your number one, and please don't give me your number one again. I know, even if you're a strong advocate of your number one, give me your number two. All right. I don't think it's going to be that dissimilar, but it's so much fun to click the thing. So why don't we just do number 3 for the heck of it? Yeah. All right. I appreciate that. So where does that, Kate, get us roughly, give or take? Why don't you give us an overview of whether or not we balance, based again on the limited amount of money that we requested in terms of cuts and revenue?
I think you did a really good job, actually. I think you were looking at the exact hard choices that the mayor is looking at every day. You heard from department heads what their pitch is. They come in and make the exact same pitch to him and to Greg and say, oh, Mayor, don't cut me. My service is the most important. And then he's got to weigh those trade-offs. And hearing from you is really valuable for us and for him as we kind of weigh what department heads are saying. In terms of how far we got to $438.6 million of a remaining deficit. That's really good. You should feel really proud of that. That's almost $100 million that you guys found together. And you came up with some solutions that you agreed on. So I would say good, excellent work, but it also shows you how hard it is, right? That means we still have to go back, and the mayor has to come up with a package that cuts another $400 million from the city's budget. And he's going to go back to these same departments and say, okay, what else can you give me? So that's kind of where we are.
Greg,
Thoughts about that?
Any final thoughts, Greg? And then I'll give you my final thoughts and my parting wishes.
And I want to give them some instructions before they go.
Well, the one final thought that I wanted to add before we wrap up is there are 3 people in particular. There are a lot of folks who really made today possible, but there are 3 people in particular that I want to thank for really going above and beyond the call to put this event together. Kate Howard, who is the mastermind of today's event. Renee Willette, I don't know where's Renee, in my office, who helped a lot putting this together, and Nick Panagopoulos, who's at the back of the room. Thanks to all of you for your hard work putting this day together.
Let's do the instructions.
Because I know you'll listen to me if you get to listen to him last. Okay, so final thank you. So thank you to all of the department heads who are here today. Your participation, I think, really enriched the conversation, and also you got a chance to make your case to the public. So thank you for being here. Thank you also to all of the volunteers who came to help staff, to do check-in, to set up the food. Thank you. You made the event go so smoothly. Thanks to the Recreation and Park Department for hosting us today, and to the Academy of Sciences for donating the complimentary tickets to the Academy. So thank you to both of you. Thank you to Phil's and Safeway for donating the food and the refreshments. There is actually, there's some extra food in the back, and I want to encourage you to go take some before you leave. That would be great. And then finally, thank you to Next 10, to Sarah and to Sonali for taking us through this today, for making the process go so smoothly. Before you go, there are clickers on your table. Those clickers cost $40 each. And Sarah and Sonali are going to be really upset if you walk off with one of them. So please make sure to put them in the middle of the table or give them to your facilitator. Second, there's a yellow form. It looks like this. It's a meeting evaluation. We want to know what you thought of today. And finally, if you wrote down a blue card, if you wrote a question, a comment, or an idea, please leave that on the table, and we'll come over and pick it up and give them to the mayor so he can review them. Okay? All right, Mayor, it's up to you.
Final thing. Once again, thank each and every one of you. I really appreciate this. Is a remarkable thing. So a big round of applause to all of you for taking the time to be here this morning and to help us. I want you to know this. Last week I did an online town hall. We had about 25,000 people click in to participate in that online town hall. This is not the last opportunity for you to engage in this process. Please know that the city not only functions through the Board of Supervisors, but through commissions. Those commissions meet on a consistent basis, and there's ample opportunity for you to engage with commissioners to make recommendations of how they should encourage and shape the governance of this city. I will be evaluating all of these comments, the comments that are coming from my commissions, comments that are coming from public's input all across the city over the course of the next 2 months. We will submit a balanced budget by June 1st for all city departments, by May 1st for those non-general fund, those enterprise departments. Here's the point I want to make. I am creating, and this is very exciting, for the first time, an online budget portal. It's called sfbudget.org. sfbudget.org. This launches next week. You can play a budget challenge, even much more robust than what we've done here today. And you can make suggestions, and you can let us know what's on your mind. sfbudget.org. Please take advantage of this. It will provide resources and provide references and provide the opportunity, again, to make your voice heard. We're doing more drop-in days in terms of, if you want to meet with me directly, the opportunity for you to do that. We did them last Friday down at Mission and Tenderloin. We'll be doing more of those in the next few months. And we encourage you, again, to continue to participate and make your voices heard and to make your thoughts known to all of us. Again, thank you, each and every one of you coming out today. I really appreciated the opportunity. Thank you.